Hi everybody, this is Mr. Manning, and this video is going to be about credit. Credit is maybe one of the most important topics we are going to talk about in personal finance, and the reason I feel that it is probably one of the most important topics is because credit is something that you will probably have to deal with at a young age. Most people start dealing with credit once they get out of high school, and they might take loans out for college or for a car, or they might have credit cards. And whenever they do that, they are using credit. So therefore, it's very, very important to understand what credit is, understand some of the advantages and disadvantages of using credit, and basically how to be responsible with credit, because it is something that if you are not responsible with, it can end up hurting you in the future. So we're going to most likely have a two-part video with this information. The PowerPoint that I'll be using has 21 slides, and I know you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, that's a lot of slides. However, this information is extremely important, and we're going to go through each one of them and talk quite a bit about some of the info that you're going to need to know. I've also got a set of notes that go along with this information. It's called Credit, Good, Bad, or Ugly, and I put three question marks behind it because for some people, credit can definitely be a good thing. It can definitely be a bad thing, and in some instances, it can even be an ugly thing where it ends up affecting other parts of your life. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So what exactly is credit? There's a lot of misconceptions about what credit is and who should use it and who shouldn't. So credit is basically just when you borrow money. It's when you receive something and you promise to pay somebody back at a future date. And usually, whenever they allow you to do this, they charge you interest, which basically means that they're going to want more money back than what they originally were going to charge you. So we'll talk a little bit about how interest can affect your credit, or more importantly, how your credit can affect the interest that you receive, and then like what would be a typical interest rate, or what we call annual percentage rate for different types of loans. Okay, so let's get a few keywords out of the way before we go any further. So two keywords, lender and borrower. So the lender is the person giving the money. They are the usually a bank of some sort, but they could also be an individual as well. But they are lending money to the other person in a loan. The borrower is the person that is receiving that money and promising to pay it back later. I've already mentioned interest, but interest is usually expressed in a percentage, and different loans will have different interest rates. And basically, this is the amount of money that you pay for the right or privilege to use money or to borrow money. Here in yellow, I put annual percentage rate, or sometimes we call it APR. This is basically the interest rate, or the amount that it costs you per year to use credit. So whenever you hear somebody say APR, they're talking about a percentage rate over an entire year. And whenever we talk a little bit in further detail about APR, in fact, you're going to have an entire video about APR and how to do the math behind it. But whenever we talk about it, we're talking about it in a year. So that's why the A stands for annual. And then annual fee. Sometimes, this doesn't come with every loan, thankfully, but sometimes there will be loans that you receive, usually it's credit cards, where they are going to charge you an annual fee. It's a one-time fee at some point in the year, and it's basically just to have the privilege of using the credit or having that loan. This is not a percentage rate, it's an actual dollar amount. There are a lot of credit cards that do not charge an annual fee. So therefore, as long as you have a good credit score, and we'll talk more about that too, but as long as you have a good credit score, you really should not pay an annual fee. Okay, just a few more key terms. So credit limit. This is the amount of money that you can borrow. So whenever someone agrees to let you borrow money, they're going to give you a limit, and they're going to say, we're not going to allow you to have more than $1,000 or more than $5,000 or whatever it is. And if you go over that limit, then you usually get charged another fee. So a lot of times people get into a really tough situation where they have spent a lot of money on a credit card and they're close to their credit limit, and then they end up going over the credit limit and they add on a fee on top of that, and it just becomes like a snowball effect where they're getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the amount of money that they owe that particular bank. Okay, minimum payment. So whenever you receive a loan or receive a credit card, and you do use it, and you rack up a balance with it, they're going to send you a bill, just like any company would. And on the bill, there's going to be a few different numbers. One of the numbers is going to be the total amount that you owe, and then another number is going to be called the minimum payment. And basically, what they're saying is, we know that you owe this amount, but just so to stay in our good graces and that we, don't get upset with you, you only have to pay this minimum amount. And usually it's a very small amount. Usually it's like maybe less than 5% of the total that you owe. Credit card companies actually want you to pay the minimum payment. And that seems kind of weird. Most people think, well, they want their money back. Why don't they want you to pay the entire thing? If you only pay the minimum payment, that means that you are keeping a balance. And if you keep a balance, then they can charge you interest. And they want to do that. That's how they make their money. They want to charge you interest. So whenever they send you these bills, they try to make the minimum payment look really attractive. You might owe $1,000, but the minimum payment's only $20. And you're thinking to yourself, do I want to pay $1,000 or do I want to pay 20? And most people would say, I only want to pay 20. Well, the problem is once you only pay 20, then that $980 that's left, they charge interest on, and that's how they make their money. Grace period. This is the amount of time that you have to pay your bill. So whenever they send you a bill, they'll say you have, oh, sorry guys, they'll say that you have maybe 14 days or 21 days to pay your bill. If you do not pay it within that amount of time, you once again receive a fee. So there's a lot of ways to receive a fee with a credit card. And this is why people end up getting into so much trouble with them, is because they get too close to their credit limit, or they're not responsible and they don't pay it on time, or they only pay the minimum payment. So credit cards can be kind of a dangerous thing. You probably have heard lots of people say that they're evil, and the people that say that are probably the ones that have had bad experiences with them. I'm not telling everybody to go out and get a credit card. Definitely not telling you that. But I do want you to understand that if you use it responsibly, it can sometimes be a good thing. Okay, so there's actually two different types of credit. There's one called installment, which is probably going to be the one that you'll use first in your life. And then there's another one called non-installment. So let's kind of talk about what is the difference between the two. So installment would be whenever you borrow a certain amount of money, and it's usually for a very large purchase. So this would be like you're buying a house or a car, or you're paying for college, and you have a very large chunk of money that you're borrowing. And whenever you do this, the people that you borrow it from, the bank usually, they set up a payment plan for you. So let's imagine you're buying a car and it costs $10,000 and you borrow all $10,000 of it. And whenever you take that loan, you agree that you're going to pay it back over the next 5 years or over the next 6 years. So what they usually do is they'll take the amount of months in your time period. So if it's 5 years, there are 60 months. And they will divide up the loan by 60 months. And then you will actually pay the same amount of money every single month. So your payment never goes up or down. There's no minimum payment because it's always just one payment. So you don't really have much of a choice of how much you pay. You're always going to pay the same amount. Like I said before, usually large purchases are done this way. Installment loans are kind of a good way to get started with credit because with an installment loan, you know exactly how much you owe all the time. And it can be a little bit easier to budget because you know that you have a car payment or you know that you have to pay your mortgage. Non-installment loans are usually for credit cards. This is when a bank says, well, we will loan you up to this amount of money, but you go ahead and spend as much as you want. So like a credit card, let's say you apply for a Visa card and they give you a credit limit of $5,000. Well, you do not have to go out and spend that $5,000. In fact, I would recommend that you don't go out and spend that $5,000. But let's say you 1 month spend a couple of $100 on it, and then the next month you spend maybe a few more $100 or maybe even $1,000 or whatever it is. So whenever you get your bills for a non-installment loan, it's going to be varying amounts of money. And this is where that whole minimum payment thing comes into play because they are not expecting you to pay back the entire amount. They're just telling you a minimum that they want you to pay back. These can be the ones that can get out of hand because your payments fluctuate depending on how much you have spent, and if you don't pay off the entire amount, they charge you interest. Okay, we're going to talk about advantages and disadvantages of using credit, and then we will stop this part of the video and we'll go to part 2. So advantages. You hear a lot of bad things about credit, but there are actually some good things. So the first one is convenience, kind of like debit cards. Credit cards can be used in a lot of different places. They're very convenient to use. Usually you just swipe the things. They can be used online. Credit cards will sometimes allow you to take advantages of sales and promotions, especially if you get store credit cards. They will send you like coupons or special promotions. But be careful. These are the ways that they trick you into signing up. They tell you, oh, you can save 10% today, or you will get coupons every month or whatever. And you might think, oh, I'm actually saving money. But the problem is that most people, whenever they get these credit cards, they will spend more than they expected to, and then they have trouble paying them off, and they end up spending more money in interest than they are saving in these coupons. So be careful. Emergencies. So credit cards are very good for emergencies. You know, guys, life happens. Sometimes things happen that we do not expect to happen, and maybe something really bad happens and we can't afford it when it does. A credit card allows you to take care of those emergencies and then pay back in the future. Nobody wants these things to happen to them, but when it does, it's nice to have a way to pay. And then, you know, other things like online, making reservations, stuff like that. Okay. Some disadvantages of using credit. So the first one is high interest rates. Now, not every single loan has a high interest rate. There are some loans that actually have low interest rates. Whenever we get into our APR discussion, we'll talk more about that. But credit cards in particular can have a very high interest rate. Some credit cards have an interest rate of into the 20%, and that is really, really high. So whenever you are signing up for a credit card, you want to make sure that you understand what the interest rate is going to be. They might try to trick you with a 0% interest for the first year or something like that. And once again, that's them trying to get you hooked. And then once you're hooked on using their credit card, that's when the interest rates really start getting high and you start having to pay. Add-on fees. This is those fees like going over your credit limit or not paying in the right amount of time or having an annual fee. These are things where they're just charging you for the right to use their credit card. And then the absolute biggest disadvantage is the danger of overspending. Some people just are not responsible enough to use credit cards. They spend more money than they should because that credit card allows them to. And then once they spend that amount of money, it's very, very, very difficult for them to get out of that debt. Okay, guys, that is the end of part 1. We will start part 2 in a moment. Thanks.